First, I wanted to mention how this is the first design conference I've ever spoken at. Spoken at tons of political and art conferences and all kinds of other conferences, but this is the first design conference, and that's weird because I'm officially a professor of design at the Parsons School of Design in New York. My official title is Professor of Motion Design. I'm not sure what that means, but they hired me because they wanted their department to include something political. And so I've done a lot of thinking about design and what it could be, and decided that I believe in political design, and that's not sustainable design. It's not product design. It's not making anything new. We already have everything we need product-wise, technology-wise to fix the world. But how do you actually get there? How do you actually change the world? How do you actually change politics and design politics? Don't know, but I'll show you one example of us trying to do that. About a year and a half ago, you might have heard of the Chamber of Commerce in the news. A lot of its members, it's a lobbying organization on behalf of big business, and a lot of its members were leaving it over its stance on climate change. It was basically opposing the Waxman-Markey bill. At the time, it was the Waxman-Markey bill. Became the Kerry-Boxer bill, and that failed. Chamber was was the main opponent on the business side, spending lots and lots of money to oppose the bill, and a lot of its members, including Apple and a couple other companies, a few other companies, left. So there was this noise in the press, and if there's one example of a situation that needs to be fixed, and maybe there's a design solution, it's around climate change. We have all the technology we need to fix it. We just aren't passing bills to limit emissions, and there are very simple methods to do that. So we were approached by an activist group concerned with this issue. Together, we decided we would speak on their behalf in the way that they should speak. Basically, instead of opposing a climate change bill, which was already really mediocre, and calling for carbon trading as a way to limit carbon emissions, and carbon trading does not work to limit carbon emissions. Instead, they should be calling for a carbon tax, which exists in various countries, does work, and immediately cuts emissions dramatically. Why not present this as a possible way that things could be and see if we can really embarrass them into asserting that, no, actually, they're bastards. They're not going to do anything to save the planet. And so together we concocted a plan. The first part of the plan was very simple. We'd write a press release on their behalf, send it out from a domain that looked like the real Chamber of Commerce domain to all the journalists we could find, and see what happened. Major change of heart, and this is one of the things that happened.
Bit of reversal on climate change from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Breaking news right now, the Chamber of Commerce saying it will reverse its position on the climate change bill and wants a carbon tax, if you will, in the Senate bill on climate change. Remember, companies like Exelon and other power producers, primarily those on the nuclear side, left the U.S. Chamber of Commerce because the Chamber opposed the climate change bill. Now the Chamber reversing its position. The reason that Exelon and others left is they said, well, this may be a tax on business, but we need to know what carbon is worth. They want to have more of a set price. All right, so the U.S. Chamber is denying it now. All right, so maybe not.
So while that was happening in virtual space, the people we were working with were very ambitious, and they decided that we should not only send out a fake press release, which we've done dozens and dozens of times, but we should actually have a press conference. And so we rented a space, or they rented a space at the National Press Club in Washington. We tried to rent a space directly at the Chamber of Commerce, but it was too expensive. you can do it, but it's expensive. So we got it at the National Press Club, which is very official.
Today, the country's largest business lobby, the Chamber of Commerce, got punked. It began early this morning when a press release went out, purportedly from the United States Chamber of Commerce, that said that the chamber was taking a very dramatic step. They would be switching positions on climate change legislation. Amazingly, the release said that the chamber would now support this legislation that it's spent months fighting against. Reporters were surprised and probably confused at this odd turn of events, but that was nothing compared to what actually happened at the press conference when it was held later on this morning. Watch this tape.
Clean coal is a technology that has not only not been proven, it basically doesn't exist.
Okay, I'm Eric Wolfschlegel. I'm with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. This is not an official U.S. Chamber of Commerce event. So I don't know what pretenses you're here. I know some of you in the press world, but this is a fraudulent press activity and a stunt.
Who are you really, sir?
And do you have a business card? Are you with the U.S. Chamber?
I do. We can discuss afterwards.
Okay. Can I see your business card?
Can I see yours? If you would like to have a press conference, you can have your own press conference, sir.
What is your position?
But you can't come in here and barge in and interrupt our press conference.
What is your position? What is your position at the Chamber of Commerce?
I just spoke my position.
We've got it working. What is your title and your official title at the U.S. Chamber?
I'm the assistant to Mr. Donahue.
Okay. This guy is a fraud. He's lying. This is, a stunt that I've never seen before. So if you'd like to actually talk to the legitimate Chamber of Commerce, I've got my business cards outside. This gentleman, I will assure you, does not have any business cards, and he's not legitimate. This sign-in sheet here.
I'm sorry, excuse me, sir. We rented this room.
Yes.
You're going to have to refund us.
Fraudulently.
You know what, excuse me?
Under fraudulent. It's
Sir?
fraud. It's illegal. Anyone else want my business card?
Yes.
Come on outside,
Does the
please.
chamber support climate legislation?
Thank you. There you are. There you are. Who are you?
I'm Kate Shepard.
With?
Mother Jones.
And that is how you punk at the Chamber of Commerce.
Yeah, she explains the whole thing, makes fun of him for the business cards, and so on. So, yeah, the part that we designed was pretty limited. It was a press release and a fake press conference. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce then helped us by designing a whole bunch of additional layers. Most dramatically, Eric Wolfschlegel barging in with a pencil behind his ear and interrupting the press conference, which extended the press for this event by about 3 days. We got on CNN, MSNBC, not Fox, but all the other networks. And then they continued doing good work by buying Google ads so that if you emailed your friend about the Yes Men, you would get an ad at the top saying U.S. Chamber fights back, join our fight against the extreme left-wing agenda. And you'd click and you'd be asked to contribute money to the Chamber of Commerce so that they could fight us, which is hilarious because they have a daily budget of about $450,000 to lobby against not only climate change, but healthcare, labor rights, and everything else that people want. This made a lot of people laugh because of this contrast. But then they didn't just stop there participating in our design project. They added a whole other layer. The U.S. Chamber is suing us. It's been almost a year, and the judge still hasn't decided whether it's a lawsuit. That was basically the Chamber just helping us out a lot in all kinds of ways, extending the press, helping us make journalists laugh, and thus other people laugh, and finding out about the Chamber of Commerce. Finally, who knows whether this worked? Did we achieve anything? Did the Chamber of Commerce actually get affected by this? Well, it's really hard to tell, but this is what Al Gore thinks.
Today, the Chamber of Commerce changed positions, not courtesy of the Yes Men with that stunt in Washington a few weeks ago. But they're now saying, surprisingly to me, and I'm glad about it, that they want to get legislation, and they're now working with the sponsors of the bill.
So it wasn't because of us, but it happened, and that's pretty much the highest compliment we've ever been paid. After this experience and a couple of other experiences, which we don't really have time for, we realized that what we really need to be doing is not individual projects that we've been doing for 10, 15 years now that are documented in this DVD and on the web, but work with groups who have campaign goals, who have political design goals, and bring what we know how to do to them to achieve that, and basically enable them to do projects of this sort. Because when we've collaborated with groups, we found that it's far more effective and it actually comes much closer to achieving real pressure than when we just invent something that we, find something that we care about and try to apply it after the fact. So that's what the Yes Lab is. We've just hired a manager. I mentioned the Chamber of Commerce has a $450,000 lobbying budget per day. That is basically money used to lie to the public. They write tons of press releases. They make video news releases. They lobby Congress. They produce documents for senators specifically. They're not the only ones. There's many, many companies and lobbying organizations that do that. What we're doing is trying to use some of those techniques, like press releases, funny events to catch people's eyes, but for good purposes, not to lobby against decent legislation, but for it, and to try to fight corporations in what they're doing wrong. The main difference between what we do and what they do is that we reveal the hoax immediately. The Chamber never reveals that its press release about such and such is actually totally slanted. You don't find out when there's a giant story in the newspaper planted by a lobbying organization or PR agency. You don't find out the next day that it was false. The whole incubator story in the Persian Gulf War, of course, was entirely created. You found that out eventually. There was a documentary about it, but if it was in the newspaper at all, it was on page 5. So that's the other main difference. People find out that this is fake almost immediately, in the middle of the broadcast, hopefully. We printed 100,000 copies of this. We decided to publish it a week after the election, bank on Obama winning, and have the whole thing be about the fact that electing him is not nearly enough, and that change won't happen unless people take to the streets and make change happen once he's elected, that's the right moment. And in American history, that's when things change, when you have a relatively progressive president and a crisis, and people take to the streets. That's when things actually happen and good things change. You see progressive change. So the paper was basically all about that. It was post-dated 6 months in the future, showed a world that could be, the Iraq war over, maximum wage law enacted, nationalized health care, free education, higher education, people being taken to court for lies and terrible misdeeds, nationalized oil companies funding climate change efforts, all these dream scenarios that could happen. We didn't really expect them all to happen, or any of them to happen, but they're presented as they could happen and why they would happen if they did happen. It would be because people had taken to the streets to make them happen. So we passed them out as if it was real. A lot of people read it, thought it was real, read enough to get the point that we were making. And it got hugely covered in the media. I mean, that's the whole trick of what we do, is trying to make reporters laugh. That's the whole, in a word, that's it. That's what we do. Laugh or be impressed because suddenly there's 100,000 copies of the New York Times, which incidentally, it only costs $6,000 to print 100,000 copies of the New York Times. Who knew? So it's like 6 cents a copy, but for you, $5. It's not illegal to do this. We have strong free speech laws in this country. The Electronic Frontier Foundation, who are defending us against the Chamber of Commerce, are one of the main groups defending our free speech rights on the web. We're also supported by a large law firm working pro bono on that. But we've been doing this for 15 years, and we used to ask lawyers what we risked by going and, say, speaking as the World Trade Organization at a conference, that thought they were listening to the WTO, and they got this completely bizarre spiel about privatizing voting and all this. What do we risk by misrepresenting them or representing them more honestly than they represent themselves? And they would say either, you're right, or yeah, go ahead, do this, that's great. You don't risk anything, or they'd say, better watch out and not do it. And we just listened to the ones we wanted to. So that's it in a nutshell. I just encourage people to try it at home. Thanks very much.